So, today, we're going to dive into the epic collision of ideas that really shaped modern India. It's a story of ancient traditions, a massive colonial disruption, and the birth of a nation's political soul. Let's get right into it.
At its heart, what we're talking about here is a massive intellectual shockwave. I mean, think about it. How does a civilization, with thousands of years of its own political philosophy, react when a powerful, disruptive, and totally new set of ideas just arrives on its shores? Well, the answer to that question really defines India today.
To really understand modern India, we have to start by looking at its original operating system, if you will. These are the foundational ideas about society, about governance, about duty that existed for centuries, long before any colonial contact. And right at the core of this blueprint is this huge concept, dharma. Now, this wasn't just some religious idea. It was the absolute cornerstone of political and social life. It basically meant that everyone, from the king all the way down to the farmer, had a specific role and a specific duty. The ultimate goal? It wasn't just about grabbing power. It was about maintaining cosmic balance and creating a righteous society.
What this slide shows so well is that ancient India was never just one thing. It was never a monolith. Right alongside that dominant Vedic tradition, you had these really radical dissenters, like the Lokayata school. These guys were materialists. They rejected religious authority and basically argued that the only thing that's real is what we can see and experience. This long history of internal debate is absolutely crucial to the story.
So, into this ancient, incredibly complex world comes this completely new and disruptive force. The arrival of the British didn't just change the maps, it fundamentally changed the entire language of politics. All of a sudden, Indian thinkers had to grapple with these totally foreign concepts. You've got constitutionalism, this idea that limits the state's power with laws. Then there's liberalism, which champions individual rights. And of course, the whole framework of modernity itself. This wasn't just a military occupation, you see. It was an intellectual invasion that forced a reevaluation of, well, everything. And the thing is, this change happened so fast. As you can see from the timeline, in just over a century, you go from the establishment of colonial rule to the founding of the Indian National Congress in 1885, created to spell out national goals. And then you have these key events, like the really divisive partition of Bengal in 1905, that just acted as catalysts, sparking massive protests and forging a new, unified sense of what it meant to be India.
Okay, so this brings us right to the heart of our story, the huge debate that just erupted inside the nationalist movement itself. Faced with this totally new political reality, Indian leaders had to figure out the best path forward, and let me tell you, they were deeply divided. It all boils down to this one massive question. What do? Right? Do you work within the system that the British created and try to reform it from the inside, or do you just reject it completely and fight for a total revolution? This was the fundamental split.
And this table here, it just lays out the two opposing camps so perfectly. On one side, you have the moderates. They believed in gradual change, using constitutional means. On the other side, the extremists who argued for nothing less than complete liberation. And their view of Britain? That was the core of their disagreement. The moderates saw British institutions as potentially useful tools for modernizing India. But the extremists? They saw those exact same institutions as instruments of economic and cultural exploitation that had to be torn down completely.
Now this quote just perfectly captures the moderate mindset. These were often British-educated lawyers and scholars, and they genuinely believed in the ideals of British constitutionalism. Their whole strategy was to use the system's own tools, petitions, negotiations, to persuade the British that Indians were ready for self-governance.
And here you have the complete opposite view. The extremists argued that peace under British rule was just another word for subjugation. For them, you couldn't be a patriot and be loyal to a foreign power at the same time. The two things were just incompatible. They believed that real progress could only come from breaking away, and forcefully, if that's what it took.
So, we've looked at the big movements. Now, let's zoom in on some of the fascinating individuals who really became the architects of a new India. These were the thinkers who were right there on the front lines, wrestling with this huge clash between tradition and modernity. We're going to look at three absolute pioneers, Rajaram Mohan Roy, M.G. Raynade, and Jyotirao Phule. Each one gives us a unique window into how Indian intellectuals were responding to the immense challenges of their time. First up, we have Raja Ram Mohan Roy, who's often called the father of the Indian Renaissance.
He's the perfect example of someone trying to blend the best of both worlds. He used Western rationalism to critique harmful traditions like sati and polygamy, he fiercely advocated for women's property rights, and he pushed for modern British-style legal reforms to create a more just society.
And then you have M.G. Rane, a key moderate thinker who laid out this really pragmatic four-step strategy for social change. His approach was all about evolution, not revolution. He believed you start by appealing to tradition and conscience, using persuasion. Only when that fails do you bring in the power of the state with legislation. For Rane, outright rebellion was a truly final last resort, a dangerous step that he thought risked tearing society apart.
Now check this out. This is such a powerful connection. Jyotirao Phule, a radical thinker from a lower caste, saw the struggle against the caste system as part of a global fight for human rights. By dedicating his book on slavery to the American abolitionist movement, he made this profound statement: oppression is a universal evil, whether it's based on race in America or caste in India. Unlike the others, Phule wasn't trying to reform the system, he was challenging its very foundations.
So, after all this, what does this history actually mean for today? Well, as we're about to see, these debates from the colonial era, they didn't just vanish. They became the very foundation of modern India's political identity.
And that's the crucial point, the tension between reform and revolution, between honoring tradition and embracing modernity, is still right there at the core of India's political conversation. The questions that Rai, Ranade, and Phule were asking are still being debated in India today, just in a different context. And this leaves us with a final, really provocative thought. For any nation that's facing profound change, which is the better path? Is it gradual reform from within an existing system, or is it a radical revolution that tears it all down to start something new? The Indian experience shows us there's no easy answer, and that the crash of these ideas is what truly forges a nation's destiny.